Hi everyone, my name is Samin and I'm finishing up my PhD in the biology department at Oxford. Today I'm going to be talking to you about some work that I've done on the fitness consequences of social familiarity and particularly familiarity among territorial neighbors. In social species, social relationships can have a big influence on both survival and reproduction. And for territorial species, this is often discussed in terms of the deer-enemy effect, where familiarity among neighbors or individuals at a territory boundary can come with benefits that may stem from reduced aggression or active cooperation. However, it can be difficult to separate direct fitness benefits of familiarity from other socio-ecological factors that may be related to these variables. So, for example, familiarity and success might covary indirectly if some areas have higher habitat quality and those areas also support greater levels of familiarity. Individuals in those areas may appear to benefit from having familiar neighbors when in reality, there's no direct effect of familiarity on fitness. So I wanted to take a closer look at the relationship between neighbor familiarity and fitness. So because familiarity among individuals and fitness outcomes are based on both spatial and social considerations, studying neighbor familiarity in species that are seasonally territorial and that breed during a constrained period of time can make it easier to separate out the influence of various effects. So I think gray tits are an ideal species for studying neighbor familiarity. A little bit of background, gray tits are short-lived birds that forage in mixed species fission-fusion flocks in the winter and then defend their territories with their pair-bonded partner during the spring. And what's really amazing is that we have 58 years of data on the reproduction of gray tits in Whiteham Woods, which is my study site, and that allows for a really unique opportunity to look at the effects of neighbor familiarity on fitness over a long period of time. So here I set out to look at how neighbor familiarity is related to reproductive success while controlling for various factors, including pair familiarity, habitat quality, and spatial autocorrelation in fitness outcomes. And when I say familiarity, I simply mean if individuals were neighbors or pairs in previous breeding seasons. So gray tits at Whiteham Woods breed during the spring from April to July, almost exclusively in the 1,020 fixed position nest boxes, which you can see in the photo on the right, that are available across the woodland. And as I mentioned, the gray tit population and their breeding behavior has been monitored since the 1960s using a standardized procedure. So during the breeding season, nest boxes are visited to record the identity of each individual and information on the stages of each breeding attempt. So that consists of building a nest, laying and incubating eggs, and rearing offspring. And we have information about each of those stages. So we used information on the spatial arrangement of occupied nest boxes to estimate individual territories, and then classified individuals as first-order neighbors if they shared a territory boundary, and then determined if individuals were neighbors in previous years and classified them as familiar neighbors accordingly. So this figure on the right shows an example year where the beige color means that the focal individual had at least one familiar neighbor, while the brown color means that the focal individual didn't have any familiar neighbors. And gray is just if their identity was unknown or if they were a first-year bird, so they couldn't have familiar neighbors. We then ran two sets of models, one for the males and one for females, with 5 different fitness variables. In the interest of time, I won't go into the details here, but you can read more about it on the final slide, which has some more information about the analysis. So here are the results for the 5 models for each sex. Our measures of familiarity were retained through the model selection process for 3 of the models, for lay date, clutch size, and the number of fledglings. And you can see that for females, on the left, there are benefits of neighbor familiarity, but an even larger effect is familiarity within the pair, which is important for both males and females. So to summarize the main findings on familiarity, familiar pairs have earlier lay dates and more fledglings. Females with familiar neighbors have earlier lay dates, and females with familiar male neighbors have larger clutches. So why might this be the case? Females with familiar neighbors may be able to avoid having disputes in the beginning of the season and establish their territories more easily due to the increased tolerance that familiar neighbors bring, and this can carry on through the season. And if there's a perception of safety and increased food security in terms of the ability to forage more widely, females are more likely to lay larger clutches. And this can also lead to lower levels of physiological stress, which could also have an effect. And then finally, it's also likely that familiar neighbors have cooperative relationships. So a previous study in the same population looked at simulated nest box intrusions during the breeding season to see whether neighbors would join in mobbing the intruder. And they found that familiar neighbors were more likely to join in nest defense. So active cooperation can also be at play. And within the pair, individuals that have bred together before might be better at coordinating their parenting efforts at the nest. So overall, we find that familiarity is related to reproductive success. And even though there is spatial heterogeneity in fitness outcomes, which you can see on the map on the right, this relationship is not just the product of an indirect covariation in space, but due to a direct benefit of fitness. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.